Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features the Uncanny X-Men number 165, cover dated January 1983. Now the cover is by the new continuing artist on the comic, and that is Paul Smith. And here he is with his signature over here, penciling and inking the cover image, and dated August 1982. So getting a head start on the book before it would have come out at probably November 1982. And the cover image is really eye-catching and somewhat horrifying too, as it portrays the transformation, metamorphosis, transfiguration, the title of the story inside, of Storm into a brood queen. And really it's nicely done with these motion lines, with the stylistic detail of having Storm's hair merge and morph into the hair of this second figure, this midway figure halfway between human and brood, and then this horrifying brood insect with its slobbering mouth and fangs here on the bottom of the image. No backgrounds here, no backgrounds required. It really conveys the emotions here and also the horrific transformation. A really great image to start what was 12 months on the book. I looked up this and there was an editorial deal made. Paul Smith had been working on Doctor Strange, and there was an arrangement made with the X office, so Louise Jones, later Simonson, to have Paul Smith on loan for 12 months only. So he did 365 days worth of art and work for Uncanny X-Men, including the Alpha Flight crossover with the X-Men, and after that he was gone from the series, which seems really strange today because obviously he was hugely popular as an artist on the comic. And for me, the reason for that is he really does follow on from one aspect of the John Byrne and Terry Austin run in terms of the art, and that is the clarity and crispness of the art, and you get that returning to the book with Paul Smith coming on board for this very memorable seminal run on the comic, but limited. So let's open this one up to the splash page. This is still the Brood saga, the X-Men in space, and this picks up immediately from the end of the previous issue. And a device of Claremont's was to open a sequel comic, like the next issue of a comic, if the previous one ended on a cliffhanger with the dialogue from the cliffhanger. So we have that from Cyclops here. Explosive decompression. We're being sucked out into space. Now, it's not as dramatic as it was in Cockrum's rendition of the explosive decompression in the previous issue. So Paul Smith coming on board here, and he doesn't have all the strengths of someone like Cockrum, let's say, but you can see it very clearly. His art very uncluttered, not as busy as Cockrum's, and so you can see all the individual figures there, and there are some outstanding pages that are coming up later in the comic that I will dwell on once we get to them. So the title of the story, Transfigurations, and the creative team, Chris Claremont writer, Paul Smith penciler, Bob Wiacek inker. So Wiacek staying on from the Cockrum run as inker over Paul Smith, the new penciler. And then this is really interesting here, Elle Varley, that's Lynn Varley, later Frank Miller's wife, and the colorist obviously of the likes of Dark Knight Returns most particularly, but as well Ronin and other of Miller's seminal 1980s comics. Tom Orzechowski letterer, and that rounds out the creative team. So now we're into the story, and what I like about Claremont's writing at this time period is that he's very much into thinking out if there's a problem, how does it get solved? And this gets worked out by Cyclops here. So Cyclops orders Colossus to turn to his armored form and block the hole in the hull of Lilandra's yacht. Then he orders Nightcrawler to teleport Lilandra to the bridge so that they can begin assessing the damage and maybe effecting repairs. So there they are on the bridge, and Lilandra confirms the repair systems have failed. We'll have to key in each function manually. I'll divert more air to the hangar That should buy us the time we need. So that's the immediate problem, but there's an overhanging problem for the X-Men, which is that they've been implanted with eggs by the Brood Queen, and that's why Nightcrawler here is despondent. He asks, why bother? We're only postponing the inevitable. We're doomed, Lilandra. But Lilandra isn't prepared to give in. She says, perhaps, my friend, but Wolverine could be wrong, because it was Wolverine who revealed that fact to the X-Men in the previous issue. So Cyclops still here intent on plugging the breach. So he tells Wolverine to use his adamantium claws to cut loose a chunk of the deck, which he does, but then he's yanked free because Lilandra tries to maintain pressure in the bay, so the X-Men will have air to breathe. The wind suddenly intensifies, yanking Wolverine free. Now he's heading directly towards Colossus, so they're going to crash. He's going to crash into Colossus, so Colossus grabs him, and Cyclops now uses his optic blasts to knock free that chunk of metal that Wolverine cut with his adamantium claws, and then the metal chunk is used to seal the hole in the hull, and everybody's back down on the floor. And a little bit of comedy there where Wolverine ends up landing on Colossus's chest, and he says to Kitty, he's fine, Kitty, I'm fine, everything's hunky-dory. That is, if you ignore the fact that the X-Men are as good as dead. So they've dealt with the immediate problem of the explosive decompression caused by Binary going wild and bursting out the side of the ship in the previous issue. Presumably she's gone to the Brood homeworld in order to get payback for the implantation of the eggs in the X-Men. But they had to deal with the damage that she caused with her reckless bursting through the side of the ship. But they still have those eggs implanted in them, and that's a problem. And then we get a scene shift to Earth, and things are completely different on Earth. We've got Stevie Hunter here, who's Kitty Pryde's dance teacher, sunbathing with Moira MacTaggert by the pool. And you've got Ileana, who now is a 13-year-old girl who is enjoying the outdoor swimming pool at the X-Mansion. And there's a bit of dialogue here between Moira and Stevie, and we get some insight into Stevie. She's a dance teacher, yes, formerly a ballerina, but she was in a car accident, and that's why she's not able to dance professionally herself anymore. And her old injury gives her a twinge there in her knee, and she says, I'm okay, it's just a spasm, it'll pass. I was in an accident years ago, shattered my knee, docs fixed it virtually, good as new. I can walk, I can even dance a little in class. The only thing I can't do is perform. No great loss, she says, I suppose. No worse than losing your soul. Wow. So Moira's got nothing to say to that. And then she goes into the Professor. And the Professor's lost heart in recent issues. Of course, he knows that his X-Men, who he considers his children, have been abducted by Deathbird. They're somewhere off in space. His beloved Lilandra as well. And he's unable to help them. And after his recent bout in unconscious coma, he has emerged very much feeling like he has kind of lost his strength and lost his hope in his own dream. And Moira, actually, I should go back here to something that Moira says on this page, where she says he'd give his mutant powers, his very soul, to be with the X-Men right now, to lead them. He was born to be a hero, but instead he must stay behind while others battle in his stead. He chafes at the restriction. And that is interesting because this is all to do with Moira's theory that he's never really recovered. Charles has never really recovered from the loss of his legs. And what is coming in upcoming issues is an answer to that. It's coming for him, even as he's at a low ebb now. So Moira enters his office in the mansion, and she says, I've a letter from Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four concerning a young Vietnamese girl, Cheyenne Khoi Man, codenamed Karma. She's evidently a mutant. Her control over her abilities is self-taught. Dr. Richards believes there's a definite possibility of things getting out of hand. He'd appreciate your help. And the professor says no. And she simply puts the letter on his desk. As you wish. No argument, Moira, he asks. I'm surprised. So now you do get an argument. He's basically kind of brought that about. So she says to him, we've fought enough these past weeks, Charles. I'm done with screaming and breaking my heart, trying to budge an immovable object. It's your life. You may live it as you please. Fortunately for the girl, there are other options. So this is the bait now that she's going to lay out in front of him. And he thinks she means herself. Perhaps, she responds. We've been associates in mutant research since before you founded the X-Men. I dare say I could do a fair job, but I was thinking more along the lines of Magneto, if we can find him, or Emma Frost's Massachusetts Academy. So that has the professor's attention. Are you insane? He's drawn in to the debate now. Magneto is the X-Men's greatest foe, and Ms. Frost's cohorts in the Hellfire Club are almost as bad, he says. You turned that child over to villains, evil mutants. Let's continue. And she says in reply, because with them, she'll have the best possible opportunity to learn how to cope with her abilities. She won't be condemned before she's bloody begun. Is that the only choice? Them or me? He asks. Moira, you aren't being fair. I cannot bring another child into this place only to see her destroyed. The X-Men are my family. I love them as I would my children. You've no conception of how much it hurts to lose them. And that's a mistake he's made there. He's blundered into Moira's own recent enough bereavement, and he realizes it. Forgive me, he asks. Moira, I didn't think about Proteus. Charles, my son, a rogue mutant as wicked as they come. He murdered a half dozen people, and in the end, the X-Men and I had no alternative but to kill him. And that's a reference back to Uncanny X-Men 127 and 28. If I'd swallowed my pride and my shame and turned to you for help, things might have turned out differently. Don't sentence karma to a similar fate. And one last thing, Charles, Proteus was my boy. He could have been ours. So now the professor is left with things to think about and mull over. So Moira really planted some seeds in his mind. He thinks of his oaths as teacher and physician, and of a girl he's never met, whose life is in his hands. Then at last a decision is made, a Rubicon crossed, and he reaches out for Reed Richards' letter and the telephone. So there you go. And that is the origin of the New Mutants, the professor's second young team of mutants that he will train in the use of their powers and also in the ethos of his dream of peaceful coexistence between humans and mutants. So now the scene switches back to space, and this is remember it's Lynn Varley doing the colouring here, not Glynis Oliver, and Varley's come up with a very interesting effect here with this use of magenta and cyan in the background. Whatever technique she's using is intriguing. It looks like it's laid down maybe with a brush or something of that order. Intriguing effect. And the Shi'ar shuttle that Storm is aboard is drifting aimlessly through the same nebula that enshrouds Lalandra's imperial yacht, Zri Shar. So this nebula idea, I think Claremont has gotten from the recent Star Trek movie, Wrath of Khan, and because in that as well, ships were cloaked by being in the ambit of a nebula, if my memory serves, so Claremont very much influenced at times by films he's watched or seen in the cinema, obviously, and working in some ideas from that. And also, as in the case of The Brood, anticipating or maybe influencing filmmakers in turn, which is the possible case with James Cameron's Aliens. But anyway, back to the story, back to the comic. We zoom in on Storm at the controls of this Shi'ar shuttle that she used to exit Lalandra's yacht in the previous issue in despair at discovering the brood egg implanted within her. What am I to do? She's got a moral quandary. A life grows within me, she thinks, an egg implanted by the mother queen of the brood. It has joined its essence to mine. It spreads through, well, this says me body, but it should be my body and soul, like some loathsome disease corrupting everything it touches, reshaping me in its own image. If unchecked, it will consume me, I will die, it will live in my place. But it is not a disease, it is a sentient being. And as the X-Man Storm, as the goddess Aurora, I'm consecrated to life, sworn to preserve it at all costs. This creature is evil, but does that give me the right to destroy it? But if I do nothing, I will be destroyed, and this abomination unleashed upon the universe. I face two paths. One preserves my beliefs, though it means my death and probably that of countless others. Besides, the alternative may save me, but what then of my soul, of the beliefs that give existence meaning? So again, this kind of mirrors the end of Star Trek 2, where the whole ethical debate is about the needs of the one versus the needs of the many and vice versa. And she's thinking through that herself, like her duty to herself and versus her duty to others. Goddess, I'm so far from home. I feel so lost, so alone. Blessed Lady, hear my plea. I beg you, help me. So she really is in despair, and she needs some assistance, divine or otherwise, in order to get out of this jam. And then turn the page, and here we go. These are the first really interesting Paul Smith pages in the book, coming at a really key climactic moment as well, which is intriguing too, almost as if he was inspired by the drama of the script to put out some really interesting layouts and storytelling on these two pages. So she looks at her hands and she sees them turning into the brood tendrils. She sees a reflection of herself as a brood in the screen of the shuttle, and then she flees here. So we've no dialogue as well, and this is intriguing because Claremont, has the reputation of being a very wordy author. Lots and lots of words, prolix, and purple prose, and it is with, in particular, around this period, his work with Frank Miller on the Wolverine miniseries and Paul Smith on this year's run on Uncanny X-Men, that he will pull back and let the art do the talking. So there's something going on in Claremont's own conception of himself as a collaborator with his artists in this time period, where we get a page like this, only the few words on the page, and the art does the talking, and it does it so well too. So then she is huddled on the ground in a fetal position. The metamorphosis is nearly complete, it says in the narrative caption. When the shuttle emerges from the nebula, we see that here, so we see that Lynn Varley effect again. So it's arriving out in space, the light, so brilliant, so blinding. What can it be? Stars filling the sky, nothing but stars. And then she's herself again, and she realizes this must be the galactic core, millions of suns crammed into a relatively tiny volume of space. Living stars, living worlds, and from each I draw both spiritual and material sustenance. That sudden influx of power caught the embryo off guard and enabled me to reverse the transformation. I doubt I'll be so fortunate the second time. The embryo's influence grows with each passing second. Even here I cannot withstand it for much longer. If I'm to act, I must do so now. So what a great couple of pages, what a great little scene. And then she acts, and it's interesting. I face not two paths, but three. So there's a third option. Her previous thoughts was a false dichotomy. There's a third option. Out of fear, I denied the one I knew in my heart that I would take. I could not face the X-Men, tainted as I was by the monster within me, and so I fled. I wish I could see them now to tell them how much I love them all, to bid them farewell. Very Claremont, that little detail there. The love of X-Men for X-Men. With a last lingering look at the celestial glory about her, Storm summons the power of the entire core, the galactic core. And for the briefest of moments, a new star shines in the firmament. The process is surprisingly simple, no more actually than she does when she draws energy from the earth to manipulate the weather. But in this case, things are magnified to an unimaginable degree. As Storm hopes, the embryo does not survive the ordeal. Neither does she. She's out in space, naked, the embryo is destroyed, and the panels fade to black. So is Storm dead, or what? And another great page and another great sequence there at the bottom of the page too. Paul Smith and Claremont pulling back and leaving these panels free of any narrative captions. It's intriguing, that change in his approach to writing the comic by this point in his run. So Storm really has had a tough time of it over the last couple of years. What from being the object of Doctor Doom's affections to her having her body taken over by Emma Frost, to being bitten by Dracula, and now this. So Claremont really putting Storm, one of his favourite characters, through the ringer. Elsewhere, in the Nebula effect, and again that Lynn Varley use of the magenta and cyan there again, we're back on the on Lilandra's yacht. The repairs are ongoing, and we're back to the whole question of the brood eggs implanted in the X-Men. And Lilandra says, no, Wolverine says, look, are we going to sit around and wait for that to happen, that the brood metamorphosizes the X-Men, or pay the brood back for what they've done? And he's been harping on that as an option for the last few issues. So Lilandra steps up and says, I'm Magistrix Shi'ar, Empress of a warrior race. I will show the brood the identical mercy they've granted us. From this moment on, wherever, whenever I find them, be they highborn or low, adult or child, their lives are mine. So she's talking about genocide. And Wolverine, sounds good to me, darling, is his response. But Cyclops, who refused to be involved in killing the brood or killing the brood queen, now relents and says, after a pause, and to me, God help us all. So Wolverine then goes out wandering the yacht, and he thinks to himself, it took a lot for Scotty to admit those kind of feelings. They go against everything he believes in, everything Xavier taught him. It's a hard thing to toss away your ideals. Me, I could never afford them. And we're going to see a little bit more about the kind of like the expansion of that in this conversation with Nightcrawler. So Wolverine happens upon Nightcrawler praying and concluding there in Latin, interestingly, in nomine Patri et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, so in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, amen. And Wolverine says, I guess I never figured you for the religious type. And Nightcrawler responds, why? Don't I look the part? Because he doesn't look a little demonic or devilish. I admit, I'm rarely seen in the church, but I draw comfort from my beliefs and from prayer. Such comfort is dearly needed now by us all, because they face such a dire situation. You should try it, Logan, he says. Who knows, you might like it. And then this is intriguing from Logan. He says, I did, in the army, a mistake. So Claremont hinting at some untold story of Wolverine's past. I believe in nothing, he says. Never have, never will. What matters is what I can see, hear, smell, taste, touch. Tangible things, physical things, reality. The rest is imagination. And Nightcrawler picks up, and you've no use for that? Nope. I'm sorry, my friend, he concludes. But they're still friends. They're not going to fall out over religious differences. And look at the little detail of the crucifix that Nightcrawler is wearing around his neck as well in the art. So arm in arm, they go away to have some beers. So Nightcrawler says, I never realized how utterly, inescapably alone you must be, with nothing to hold on to but yourself, more alone than I, despite my ultra appearance, could ever be. But Wolverine retorts and says, I ain't alone, bub. I got you. So that's nice. They're good mates now, fast friends. And then he suggests, come on, let's see if they got any brew on this bucket. Really nice, quiet scene. This page doesn't have to be there at all for the advancement of the story. It's all characterization work and intriguing Claremont thinking out, well, some of these characters are going to be religious and some of them not. And why? What would that mean for them in a situation like this? What would their actions be? And we get that here with Nightcrawler praying. I do like that. So let's continue. And then we've got Kitty Pryde, and she's asleep in her cabin in the yacht, and she's having a nightmare there. And again, another nice couple of pages here from Paul Smith, kind of using his imagination here for this transformation of corpse Kitty in her coffin, metamorphosizing into the Brood. And in the narrative captions, we're told the corpse opens its eyes and smiles, and then it isn't human anymore. It's a sleazoid, like the Mother Queen, only smaller. And yet, there's something in the way it moves and acts that reminds Kitty of herself. It grabs her. She tries to phase through its tentacles, but her power no longer works. She claws at the ground with all her might, but her muscles are no match for the young queen's. She screams for help, but her friends, her parents do nothing as she's dragged into the coffin, into the grave. It's really good stuff. And then, of course, she wakes up screaming. But who's there to hug her except for Peter Rasputin Colossus? And he's there to comfort her and tell her that he'll protect her. But how can he protect her from the Brood egg that's growing inside her? So now we get more pages of characterization between these two, where Kitty says that she's not afraid. Of course you aren't, my error. She says, Peter, I don't want to die. Who does? He responds, Peter Nikolaevich Rasputin, don't you dare laugh at me. She's irked by him. This isn't funny. This isn't a joke. But Colossus's response is interesting. He says, it is either laugh or cry, little one, and I refuse to do those monsters, the Brood, the honor of tears. And she retorts, Peter, don't you understand? Are you just too stupid or too scared to accept the truth? We're going to die. And he responds, yes, Kitty, we are. And now here's his big speech. What you do not comprehend is that we are dying from the moment of birth, indeed from the instant of conception. Creation bears within itself the seeds of its own destruction. So Colossus is an unexpected philosopher here, and he continues, our lives are finite things. We live our allotted span and are no more. Regardless of what we may do, how hard we try, the best we can do, we can hope for, is a brief delay of the inevitable. It is sad, even cruel, but it is also our most fundamental reality to be faced and accepted. So really we get a correlation there between Colossus's position and Wolverine's, but Colossus's is more poetic, more philosophical, but the two of them atheists. And Kitty is different. Of course, Kitty has Jewish faith. That's been established in previous issues, but also faith, because that's what helped her. Her Star of David was effective against Dracula, comparable to Nightcrawler, who also has religious faith in the cross. So Claremont has juxtaposed two dialogues here in the face of this desperate situation of its seeming inevitable death, a dialogue between atheist perspective and a religious type perspective. And Kitty says, dying after a long full life, okay, I guess. Dying in battle, okay, I can handle them. But to end like this, to have this alien thing inside me growing like a cancer, knowing that I could turn into a sleazoid at any moment, Peter, it's more than I can bear. It's horrifying. And then something interesting happens here, where, like, you know, they're facing inevitable death, and they kiss, and now Peter says, however, he says here, she says to him, gee, I wish I was older. So do I, he says. You're fooling, right? Humoring the kid to perk up his spirits. I knew precisely what you meant, Kat. Yeah, I've never been more serious. So he kisses her, and then he draws back and says, however, little one, you are not older. She's 14. And how old is he at this point? Is he 16? Probably 16, I would say. It doesn't matter. Yes, it does, he says. Why? When you're doomed, what's the point of playing by society's stupid rules, she asks. This is not the proper time or place, he says. We may never get another chance. You never know. The universe is full of surprises, he says. Most of them nasty. But then she gets a surprise that isn't nasty. It's Storm appearing in her vampire aspect, and she addresses them and says how good it is to see you. And Colossus puts his hand through her. You know, there's something weird about this. It's like she's been resurrected, like the appearances of Christ in the Acts of the Apostles, with Colossus putting his hand through her shoulder. Interesting symbology and subtext going on. But in any case, Colossus says, your teeth, your eyes, the marks of a vampire, are you real or a ghost? And then she's gone. And then she appears to Wolverine and Nightcrawler. And she's appearing in different garb and from different periods of her life. So Wolverine spies her. Nightcrawler says, I saw, I heard, but I did not believe. Again, very evocative of the appearances of Christ in the Acts of the Apostles. His appearances, like after his resurrection. I think it's not just Acts of the Apostles. I think it's also in the Gospels as well, if I'm not wrong. This kind of moment of doubt, like this St. Thomas, the doubting Thomas business going on. And then they're wondering, this is a little comic moment here as well, where they're wondering whether it's the beer or the alcohol that has them hallucinating. Could be we're cracking up, but I feel fine, sober, sane, says Wolverine. And then she's back. But here she is as a child, like when Professor X first saw her in Cairo, Egypt, many years previously. And she says, everything's so big. No, it's I who am small. And then Nightcrawler puts his hand through her, his fingers through her. There's a little colouring error there. It would be clearer if his finger there were coloured white with his glove. And then she disappears and she's saying, this isn't right either. So Wolverine wonders, an illusion, a 3D image? Yet when you passed through her, she looked as surprised as you did. So we've got to alert the others. And there is another appearance of Storm, again in an earlier version of herself. I think from when Professor X went to recruit her to join the all different X-Men. And Wolverine here moving up towards her saying, relax, babe, you're among friends, no need to be scared. And they're wondering, is it a holographic projection or is it real? And then she appears like she did in issue 160, the one that was set in Belasco's demonic dimension, as an old woman and priestess. And she says to them now, my beloved friends, forgive these clumsy attempts to contact you. I'm improving my control with experience, but it is proving far more difficult than I imagined. So Lilandra all the while is working on the ship and the fact that she has seen with the ship's sensors that there is something very large, very close, but the nebula is scrambling the sensors. Which way do we go? She's wondering, while all of this is happening. Without a definite fix on the contact, we could ram into it. We need more data before we can act. And then here, visual contact, so she can see what that very large, very close object is outside the nebula. And it's one of the Brood's living starships, and here it is. And again, that magenta and cyan background that Lynn Varley has whipped up for the nebula effect. But what's happening is the yacht is being swallowed whole. And Cyclops, with the wrong hair colouring here, orders full power to the engines. The rest of you activate the ship's combat systems. Let's punch our way out of here pronto. But it turns out that it's too late, as Lilandra says. The creature broadcasts a power field that dampens the matter-antimatter core. The drive is inert. Ship's weaponry has been rendered inoperative as well. And Storm says, that was for my protection as much as yours, Lilandra. And now here she is in her usual appearance. I could not risk your injuring the Acanti. So that's the first time we learn what the living starship is called, before I had an opportunity to explain. Practice makes perfect, she says at last. I meant to look like this from the start. There is no cause for alarm. So it really is her, and now it seems like she is solid enough to be hugged. Cyclops with the wrong hair colour asks for an explanation. What happened to you? A great deal. she says. Not all of it pleasant. I'm not the storm you knew. How can you be so sure this star beast, Acanthe you called it, won't harm us? And the answer is startling. I know her at least as well as I know myself, Scott, because she is myself. The Acanthe and I are one. Wow, so that is completely unexpected. And we're going to have that unraveled and unpacked in the next issue. In 30 days, the X-Men's final confrontation with the Brood, which has been going on for pretty much a year now, the Brood saga, wherein they'll either live free or die. So everything is going to conclude and climax in the next double-sized issue. And here we go. The business of the letter from Reed Richards to Professor X concerning Karma. There she is here. And the advertisement, full-page advertisement for the new X title, The New Mutants. Well, first of all, a graphic novel by Chris Claremont and Bob McLeod. But it would be then a ongoing series. So set up in this issue, and here we see the team for the first time. No letters page in this particular comic. So there you go. Paul Smith's arrival on the title. He did 1 year of work and then he was gone, but an incredibly memorable year, and some pretty cool pages and sequences in this issue, promising more in terms of how his art and his storytelling would develop in the course of that year's work on the title. Let me know your thoughts on this issue in the comment section to the video. If you enjoyed my review and commentary, please like the video on YouTube. It really does help the channel. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.